A mistaken seat, a stolen glance, a love written by fate. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The soft hum of conversation and the clinking of silverware filled the air of a quiet New York cafe that evening. Warm light spilled across polished tables, turning every plate into a small piece of art. Outside the window, the city was still awake, headlights sliding like rivers of gold, but inside, time seemed to slow. Elena Tran hesitated at the entrance, clutching the strap of her worn leather bag. Her reflection in the glass door looked out of place among the polished marble floors and linen napkins. Her dress was second-hand, her shoes a little scuffed, but she had promised herself that today she would not back out. This was supposed to be her first meeting with a gallery recruiter, a chance maybe the only one to show her sketches. She inhaled deeply, whispered, "Table 12, and stepped inside. Her heart pounded as she scanned the cafe. Every seat seemed taken except one near the window, where a man in a crisp white shirt sat alone, scrolling through his notebook with quiet focus. The number on his table card read 12. Relief washed over her. This must be it. She approached, nerves trembling just beneath her smile. "Hi, I am Elena. I'm here for the interview," she said softly. The man looked up, startled for a second. His eyes were gray, steady, with a warmth that did not quite match his suit. For a heartbeat, he said nothing. Then a faint smile curved his lips. "So am I," he replied. Elena laughed nervously and slid into the seat across from him. "Oh, thank goodness. I was afraid I might be late. Traffic was insane." He closed his notebook and leaned back slightly, studying her. "Do you mind if we talk before they call us in?" "Not at all," she said quickly. "Honestly, I could use the distraction." Their conversation began with small talk, but soon drifted deeper. She told him she worked as a waitress at a small diner on 9th Avenue, that she painted at night when the city went quiet. She dreamed of opening her own studio one day, where anyone could draw, even if they had no money. He listened, his expression softening with every word. "That sounds rare," he said quietly. "People who still believe in beauty when they can barely afford it." She smiled, embarrassed. "Well, someone has to." "Oh." He hesitated before adding, "And what do you draw?" "Chairs," she said, almost laughing at how absurd it sounded. "Old chairs, broken ones mostly. My dad used to fix them before he passed away. I guess I like to think every chair tells a story." He looked down at the small sketchbook resting beside her cup. "May I?" She nodded. He flipped through pages filled with graphite lines and fading colors, empty rooms, chipped wood, sunlight falling across forgotten seats. When he looked up, his voice was different, softer. "These are beautiful, Elena." Her cheeks flushed. "You are just being kind." "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe I just recognized something honest." Before she could answer, her phone buzzed on the table. She glanced down. A message from Gallery Recruiter, Table 12, blinked across the screen. "Sorry for the delay. I will be there in 5 minutes." Her eyes widened. Slowly, she lifted her gaze back to the man. "Wait," she whispered. "You are not from the gallery, are you?" He blinked once, then exhaled, caught. "No," he said simply. Her face went pale. "Oh my God, I am so sorry. I thought—" She pushed back her chair, fumbling for her bag. "This is so embarrassing." "Wait," he said, standing too. "It is all right. I sat at the wrong table. Elena," he interrupted gently. "It is fine. Really." But she was already backing away, cheeks burning. "I am so sorry," she repeated, then turned and hurried toward the door. For a moment, he stood there watching her leave, her sketchbook forgotten on the table, her voice still echoing in his mind. Outside, rain had begun to fall softly against the window. He looked down at her sketches again, the broken chairs, the lines that carried quiet hope, and something in his chest shifted. Adrian Cole, founder and CEO of Cole Art Group, had spent years surrounded by perfection. Perfect spaces, perfect people, perfect lies. Yet a girl with second-hand shoes and trembling hands had just walked into his world by mistake, and somehow that mistake felt more real than anything in his life. He glanced toward the door she had disappeared through, rain streaking down the glass, and whispered almost to himself, "A mistaken seat. Maybe not such a mistake after all." The rain kept falling that night, turning the sidewalks into silver ribbons under the city lights. Elena hurried home with her sketchbook missing from her bag, unaware that it now rested in the hands of a stranger who could change everything. The next morning, she woke to the sound of her alarm and the smell of instant coffee. Her apartment was small, walls cracked from the years, but the window faced east and caught the first light of day. She stood there for a moment, letting the sun touch her face. "New day, new mess," she whispered with a tired smile. At the cafe where she worked part-time, customers came and went in a blur. She poured coffee, wiped tables, and tried not to think about last night's humiliation. Every time she remembered his voice, calm, gentle, amused, her cheeks burned. "A mistaken seat," she muttered, shaking her head, "and I made a complete fool of myself." But across the city, Adrian Cole sat in his corner office at the top floor of Cole Art Group, the morning light spilling across glass and steel. Her sketchbook lay open on his desk. Between calls and meetings, he kept turning the pages. There was something raw in every line she drew, something he had forgotten art could hold. For years, his world had been numbers, contracts, and gala speeches. But those broken chairs, they felt alive. His assistant, Rachel, entered with his schedule. "Sir, the board is waiting in conference room 3. He closed the sketchbook gently. "Push it 10 minutes, he said. "I need to make one call." "Ik." He dialed the cafe's number, printed faintly on a napkin inside the sketchbook. "Hello," he said when the waitress answered. "Is there an Elena Tran working there?" A pause. "Yes, she is on shift. May I ask who is calling?" "An old acquaintance," he replied, almost smiling. That afternoon, when Elena's shift ended, the manager handed her a note. "Someone left this for you," he said. She opened it carefully. It read, "You left something behind. Table 12. Same time." Her stomach flipped. She thought of ignoring it, but curiosity won. By evening, the cafe looked exactly the same, the warm lights, the quiet music, but this time the rain had stopped. She entered cautiously, scanning the tables. He was there, seated again by the window, the same calm presence in a world that always rushed. On the table lay her sketchbook. "You left this," he said softly. "I was not sure I would ever see it again," she answered, sitting down slowly. "Thank you." "Ugh." He handed it to her with care, like something fragile. "I looked at your work. You see stories in things most people throw away." Elena hesitated, unsure if she should be angry or flattered. "You looked through it?" "I did," he admitted. "And I wanted to apologize. I should have told you who I was that night. You thought I was part of that interview." Her brows furrowed. "Then who are you, really?" He smiled faintly. "Someone who believes your art deserves more than a cafe wall." The words hung between them, heavier than the quiet jazz playing in the background. She laughed softly. "That sounds like a line people use before they disappear." "I am not going anywhere," he said, his tone steady. "There is a showcase this weekend. Cole Art Group is curating local artists. I would like your work to be there." She blinked. You are with Cole Art Group?" "I run it," he said simply. For a second, everything around her seemed to blur the hum of the cafe, the rain smell drifting through the open door, the flicker of candlelight on his wristwatch. She could barely find her voice. You are the Adrian Cole?" "Yes," he said quietly. "But last night, I was just a man at the wrong table." Elena looked down, her hands twisting in her lap. "You do not have to do this. You do not owe me anything." He leaned forward, eyes sincere. "It is not about owing. It is about believing. Sometimes we sit in the wrong place just to find the right person." Her throat tightened. The humility in his words felt disarming, almost unreal. "I do not even have proper canvases," she whispered. "All my drawings are on scrap paper." "Then let us change that," he said. "Bring whatever you have. I will handle the rest." She studied him for a moment, searching for the catch, the hidden motive, but all she saw was patience, an ease that did not feel like charity, but faith. Finally, she nodded. "All right, I will try." A small smile touched his lips. "Good. And this time, let us call it fate, not a mistake." Outside, the city lights flickered against the cafe windows. Elena stepped out with her sketchbook pressed to her chest, her heart lighter than it had been in years. Behind her, Adrian watched from the doorway. rain still dripping from the awning above. For the first time in a long while, he was not thinking about meetings or markets. He was thinking about a girl who drew broken chairs, and how, somehow, she had fixed something broken in him. As she disappeared into the crowd, he whispered under his breath, "A mistaken seat. Maybe it was always meant to be." The next few days passed like a blur. Elena worked double shifts to finish her pieces, her small apartment filled with the scent of graphite and rain. Sheets of paper covered the floor, each sketch a memory. Chairs from her childhood home, a cracked stool from the diner, the shadow of a seat left empty after her father's funeral. She drew until her fingers cramped, until the city outside faded into silence. Every night, she told herself not to think about Adrian Cole. Yet every time she looked at the invitation he had written by hand, Cole Art Group Showcase, Saturday, 7 p.m., her heart quickened. Saturday arrived with soft sunlight breaking through gray clouds. Elena stood before her mirror, smoothing down the wrinkles of her only decent dress. It was navy blue, borrowed from her friend at the diner. Her shoes had been cleaned until the leather shone faintly. She held her sketchbook close, as if it could steady her breathing. When she arrived at the gallery, the world felt different. The glass doors stretched high above her like a cathedral of light. Inside, the walls glowed white and clean, lined with paintings that looked worth more than her entire life savings. The air smelled faintly of perfume and champagne. People in tailored suits and designer gowns moved gracefully from one display to another. Elena hesitated near the entrance, feeling completely invisible. Then she heard a familiar voice. "You made it." Adrian stood at the far end of the hall, dressed in a charcoal suit that made him look almost too composed. He smiled when he saw her, a smile that broke through the stiffness of the evening. "I almost did not," she admitted, clutching her bag. "I was afraid I would not belong here." "You belong here more than anyone," he said gently. "Come, let me show you something." He led her past the main exhibits to a smaller room. The lights here were softer, golden. At the center stood her drawings mounted, framed, and perfectly lit. Her name, Elena Tran, printed in elegant letters above them. Her breath caught. "You did this?" "I only gave them the space," he said. "You gave them life." Elena stepped closer, her eyes glistening as she saw her sketches hanging among the works of professionals. I never thought anyone would see them like this." Adrian watched her quietly, his expression unreadable. "The world needs to see honesty. That is what you draw. Honesty." Guests began to filter in, murmuring words like raw, real, and beautiful. A woman in pearls asked her how long she had been painting. A reporter scribbled her name down for a feature column. Elena answered softly, still half convinced she was dreaming. As the evening went on, Adrian stayed near her, guiding her through conversations, gently deflecting those who spoke down to her. He made sure she always had a glass of water in her hand, never champagne. Every gesture was small but careful, as if he knew how fragile courage could be. Halfway through the event, a voice over the speakers called for attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our guest of honor, Mr. Adrian Cole." Elena froze. She turned to him, confused. "Guest of honor?" He gave her a quiet, almost apologetic smile and stepped toward the podium. The crowd applauded as he took the microphone. "Tonight," he began, his voice steady but warm, "is not about me. It is about rediscovering why art matters. It reminds us to look closer, to feel deeper, and to believe in imperfection. I had forgotten that until I met an artist who drew broken chairs." Elena's eyes widened as people around her began to look her way. Adrian continued. "She reminded me that even broken things can hold weight, and that sometimes a mistaken seat can lead you exactly where you are meant to be. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the artist who brought us back to the beauty of simplicity, Miss Elena Tran." "Oh." The room erupted in applause. Elena stood frozen, heat flooding her face. She wanted to disappear, but Adrian's eyes found hers through the crowd. He nodded, an unspoken promise of support. Slowly, she walked to the stage. The lights felt too bright, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it. She took the microphone with trembling hands. I never expected this," she said softly. "I just draw what I miss. My father used to fix chairs for a living, and after he passed, I guess I wanted to keep fixing things in my own way." The crowd quieted, listening. "Sometimes," she added, her voice steadier now, We sit in the wrong place, or make the wrong turn, and think it ruined everything. But maybe those mistakes are how we find what we were meant for. The applause that followed was not polite, it was real. Adrian stepped beside her, whispering just loud enough for her to hear. You see? The right seat after all? After the speeches, the night carried a hum of admiration. Collectors approached her, asking about her next project. The gallery director offered her a small studio space for a month. It was more than she had ever dared to imagine. When the last guests drifted out and the lights dimmed, Elena and Adrian stood alone in the gallery. Her sketches glowed softly under the remaining light. I do not know how to thank you, she said. You already did, he replied. You showed me what art is supposed to feel like. They stood in silence, the city faintly visible through the glass behind them. Then, quietly, she said, I think I finally understand. A mistaken seat can still hold something strong. He smiled, eyes reflecting the same warmth from that first evening. And sometimes, it holds two people who were meant to meet. Outside, the city shimmered, alive and endless. Inside the quiet gallery, for the first time, both of them felt that maybe fate was not something that happened by chance, but by choice. The following week unfolded like a dream Elena was afraid to wake from. Her sketches were suddenly in magazines, her name mentioned on small art blogs, and people she had never met stopped by the gallery asking to see the girl who drew the broken chairs. But fame was a fragile thing. She still lived in the same apartment with its leaky faucet and peeling paint, still made instant noodles at midnight, and still checked her rent twice before paying. Adrian called every few days, never to talk about business. He asked if she was eating well, if she needed supplies for her new pieces, if she was sleeping enough. His tone carried the quiet care of someone used to giving orders but learning how to offer kindness instead. One evening, he visited her apartment for the first time. When she opened the door, the look on his face said everything: the cracked walls, the flickering light, the small desk covered in sketches. He stepped inside carefully, as if afraid to disturb something sacred. It is not much, Elena said, half laughing, half embarrassed. But it works. He smiled. It is honest, I like that. He noticed a half-finished drawing taped to the wall, two chairs facing each other, one broken, one whole. Is this new? She nodded. I call it balance. I think one chair holds the other up. That sounds like life, he said softly. No one stands alone. They shared takeout from the diner where she worked, sitting on the floor because she owned no dining table. The city lights poured through the window, flickering across her face. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Finally, she asked, Do you ever get tired of being perfect? He blinked, surprised. Perfect? The suits, the speeches, the way people look at you like you never make mistakes. He leaned back, thoughtful. Perfection is just fear dressed up nicely. I have made more mistakes than you can imagine. I just learned to hide them. She smiled faintly. Maybe that is why you found me. To remember what mistakes look like. He laughed quietly. Maybe so. Days turned into weeks. Adrian began stopping by her new studio space, a small room above the gallery that smelled of paint and dust. Sometimes he brought coffee. Sometimes he just sat silently while she worked. The distance between them, once marked by status and formality, began to fade. But not everyone approved. At a board meeting one afternoon, one of the senior investors confronted him. You are spending company resources on an amateur. The showcase was enough. Do not let sympathy cloud your judgment. Adrian closed the file in front of him. It is not sympathy, he said calmly. It is vision. She reminds me what this company was built for: real art, not polished investments. When word of their closeness began to spread, gossip followed. Journalists wrote that he had a new muse. Some claimed he had discovered her by design, that it was all a marketing stunt. Elena read the headlines one morning while eating breakfast and felt her stomach twist. She tried to ignore it, but whispers began even inside the gallery. Assistants lowered their voices when she walked past. A critic she admired declined an interview, saying her success seemed too convenient. That evening, she met Adrian on the rooftop garden of the gallery. The city stretched below them, glittering under a pale moon. She handed him her phone with the article open. They think I am your charity project. He read the headline slowly. Let them think what they want, he said. That is easy for you to say. You already have a name. I only have yours beside mine. Her voice trembled. What happens when they stop believing in me? He looked at her for a long moment, then set the phone aside. Elena, I did not bring you into my world to make you smaller. I wanted people to see what I saw, the strength behind those drawings. Tears stung her eyes. I never wanted your protection. I wanted a chance to stand on my own. You have that, he said gently. You earned it. She shook her head. Then let me prove it. No help. No connections, just me. His jaw tightened, but he nodded. If that is what you need, I will not stop you. The silence that followed was heavy. The distance between them, once closing, opened again like a quiet ache. A week later, Elena packed her sketchbook and left the studio above the gallery. She found a shared workspace in Brooklyn, cheap but filled with sunlight. She began drawing again new pieces, darker, deeper. For the first time, she was completely alone. Adrian visited once, but she met him at the door. Please, she said softly, I need to do this my way. He understood, even though it hurt. Just promise me you will not forget why you started. I will not, she said. Months passed. The headlines faded, replaced by newer scandals. Elena's work evolved stronger lines, more color, a quiet defiance. She was invited to display her pieces in a small community art fair. It was not grand, but it was hers. On the day of the event, she walked through the rows of artists, her heart light again. At the far end of the hall, she saw a familiar figure in a simple gray coat, hands in his pockets, watching her display from a distance. When their eyes met, he smiled, not the smile of a CEO, but the same one from the cafe months ago. She walked over slowly. You came. I would not miss it, he said. This time I stayed in the back. No titles, no speeches. She laughed, softly. Good. I think I like you better that way. He looked at her paintings chairs now standing side by side, unbroken. You found your balance, he said quietly. She nodded. And I think I found my seat. As the crowd moved around them, the world seemed to fall silent for a moment. Adrian reached out, just enough for his fingers to brush hers. Then maybe, he whispered, it was never a mistake at all. And for the first time, Elena believed him. Winter came early that year. The wind over New York carried the sharp smell of snow and the faint sound of carol singers in the distance. Elena's little studio in Brooklyn stayed cold, no matter how many layers she wore, but her heart felt warm in a way it had not in a long time. Her art fair had gone better than she ever expected. A small local collector bought 2 of her drawings, enough for her to finally fix the heater and pay rent without worry. She had proved she could stand on her own, but that did not mean she stopped thinking about Adrian. His absence lingered like music fading too slowly. One morning, as she packed her sketchbook for another day at the studio, her phone buzzed with an unknown number. When she answered, a polite voice said, Miss Tran, this is Rachel from Cole Art Group. Mr. Cole asked if you could meet him this afternoon. It is important. Her breath caught. Months had passed since they last spoke. Where? She asked quietly. At the main gallery at 4 p.m., Rachel said. He will be waiting. Elena hesitated for a long time before she agreed. When she arrived, the gallery looked almost empty. The winter light filtered through the high windows, scattering across the marble floor like broken glass. In the center stood Adrian, still in his gray coat, a man both familiar and distant. Thank you for coming, he said softly. She crossed her arms, not out of anger but protection. What is this about? He looked at her for a moment before answering. I wanted you to know something. I am leaving New York for a while. A year, maybe more. The foundation is opening a new branch in Paris, and they asked me to lead it. Her heart sank even though she told herself it should not. That is, great. Congratulations. It does not feel like something to celebrate, he admitted. Not when it means leaving things unfinished. Elena frowned. What is unfinished, Adrian? You gave me a chance. I took it. That was the deal. He stepped closer. That was never a deal, Elena. It was a beginning. The words hung between them, heavy and quiet. She exhaled slowly. Why are you telling me this now? Because I do not want you to hear it from anyone else, he said, and because I wanted to see you one more time before I go. She turned away, pretending to look at one of the empty walls. You always know how to make an exit sound poetic. Place. He smiled sadly. It is not an exit, just an ocean between 2 chapters. For a long time, neither spoke. The ticking of the gallery clock filled the silence. Finally, he said, You once told me you draw broken things because they still hold weight. I wanted you to know you were right. People can break too, and still hold someone together. Her eyes glistened, but she did not cry. Do you ever stop speaking like an artist? Only when I am pretending to be a businessman, he said. Elena laughed softly, then took a step forward. Then maybe stop pretending for once. Adrian hesitated, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Inside was a key, attached to a tag engraved with her initials. What is this? She asked. A space, he said. A small studio at the Paris branch. It is yours if you ever decide to come. No conditions, no deadlines. Just a place to keep drawing. She looked down at the key, her fingers trembling. Adrian, I cannot. You can, he interrupted gently. And you do not have to decide now. She closed the box and handed it back. If I ever come, it will be because I earned it, not because you gave it. He nodded, respecting the quiet strength in her voice. I would not expect anything less. They stood facing each other, the distance between them smaller than ever, yet filled with everything unspoken. I will miss New York, he said finally. It is the city that taught me the difference between money and meaning. And I will miss you, she admitted softly, even if I should not. He smiled, his eyes warm. Then let us call it balance again. You miss me. I remember you. It evens out. When he turned to leave, she stopped him. Adrian? He looked back. She walked up and hugged him quietly, briefly, but real. Thank you for seeing me when no one else did. He whispered near her ear. It was never luck. It was always you. And then he was gone, his footsteps fading down the marble hall. That night, Elena walked home through the snow. The city was wrapped in white silence, every streetlight glowing like memory. She stopped by a park bench and sat for a moment, letting snow gather in her hair. She pulled out her sketchbook and drew, not chairs this time, but two people standing at opposite ends of a bridge, reaching, not quite touching, but connected by the space between them. At the bottom, she wrote a single line, "Some mistakes are meant to be remembered." When spring came, her art began to travel farther than she ever had. One of her new series, titled The Seats We Choose, was selected for an international exhibition. An invitation arrived with a letter signed by the Paris branch. At the bottom, a handwritten note in familiar ink read, "The seat beside mine is still open. A." Elena smiled, folded the letter, and pressed it against her chest. Outside, the city bloomed again, and somewhere across the ocean, fate was still writing the rest of their story one seat at a time. Spring turned into summer, and the city's rhythm softened. Elena's studio in Brooklyn filled with sunlight that painted the walls gold each morning. Her art had grown beyond anything she once imagined. The series The Seats We Choose became her signature, traveling to galleries in Chicago, Los Angeles, and London. For the first time, her name stood alone on the wall, no titles beside it, no introductions needed. Still, every success carried a quiet echo. Late at night, after the lights dimmed and the noise faded, she would glance at the small box sitting on her desk, the one that held the key to the Paris studio. She had kept it sealed, but never far from reach. One afternoon, as she cleaned her brushes, the mail carrier knocked. He handed her a thick envelope stamped with a familiar crest, Cole Art Group, Paris branch. Inside was a folded invitation and a short note written in Adrian's handwriting. The foundation is hosting a global exhibition next month. The theme is connection. I would like to feature your work as the centerpiece. If you can, come. The seat beside mine is still open. M.Do. Her hands trembled slightly as she read the words. She stared at the date, June 10th, 3 weeks away. That night, she walked along the Brooklyn Bridge, the skyline glowing behind her. The wind was warm, the air filled with the sound of distant music. She thought about everything that had happened. The mistake at the café, the gallery, the gala, and the months that followed. Every wrong turn had led her here, and maybe it was time to stop standing still. 3 weeks later, she arrived in Paris. The air smelled of rain and espresso, and the Seine glimmered like liquid silver beneath the morning sunday. When she stepped into the new Cole Art Gallery, her heart lifted. The space was open, modern, yet somehow familiar, soft light, pale walls, and in the center, a single chair framed under glass. It was the same broken chair she had drawn years ago, restored and standing steady. Beside it hung her entire collection, displayed in perfect symmetry. Elena. She turned. Adrian stood by the doorway, dressed simply in a dark shirt, no tie, no suit jacket, just him. Time had changed him a little, added quiet lines to his face, but his eyes were the same. "I was not sure you would come," he said. "I was not sure either," she replied, smiling faintly. "But you kept the seat open." "I did," he said. "I hoped fate might fill it again." Oh. They walked together through the gallery, past the paintings and sketches that once lived on her apartment floor. Each piece carried a memory, every doubt, every bruise, every moment of faith. When they reached the main hall, Adrian stopped. "There is something I want to show you," he said. He guided her to a new installation, a row of chairs arranged in a circle, each carved from reclaimed wood, each engraved with a single name. Hers was among them, marked with delicate silver letters. Elena Tran. She ran her fingers over the smooth grain. "What is this?" "It is called the Seats of Kindness," he said. "Each one represents someone who reminded me what leadership really means. Not power, not wealth, just presence." Her throat tightened. "You built this?" "With a lot of help," he said with a small smile. "I wanted something real, something that would last longer than money." Ugh. As they stood there, guests began to gather for the evening exhibition. The lights dimmed, and the air filled with quiet music. When Adrian stepped onto the small stage, he paused before speaking. "Tonight," he said, "we celebrate connection, not the kind built by status or success, but by sincerity. A year ago, a young artist showed me that mistakes can be beginnings, that even the wrong seat can lead you to the right story." He turned toward her. "Elena, would you join me?" Her heart pounded as she walked up beside him. The applause that followed felt distant, muffled by the sound of her own heartbeat. Adrian continued. "This gallery, this project, all of it exists because one person refused to let circumstance define her worth. She reminded us that kindness and courage are not weaknesses, they are art forms." He looked at her then, his voice soft but clear. "And I would like to ask her something. Here, where it all began." From his pocket, he pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was not a diamond, but a simple silver ring, shaped like a tiny loop of intertwined chairs. "Elena Tran," he said, his tone shaking slightly for the first time. "Would you let me share the same seat with you for whatever comes next?" The audience gasped softly, the room frozen in a perfect silence. Elena's eyes filled with tears. She thought of that night in New York, the wrong table, the spilled coffee, the mistake that started it all. She smiled through the tears and whispered, "Yes, I think fate has been saving that seat all along." The applause rose, filling the room like a wave. Adrian slipped the ring onto her finger, and for the first time in a long while, she felt completely still, completely seen. Later, when the guests had gone and the lights dimmed, she and Adrian stood alone by the glass wall overlooking the Seine. The river shimmered with reflections of the city lights. She leaned her head against his shoulder. "Do you think mistakes always lead somewhere?" she asked. He smiled. "Only the brave ones do." Outside, the night carried the soft sound of water and wind. Inside, their reflections sat side by side in the glass, two people who once met by accident, now bound by choice. And as the camera of memory pulled back, the gallery lights glowed behind them, illuminating the words engraved above the entrance. "A mistaken seat, a stolen glance, a love written by fate." The morning after the exhibition, Paris woke in soft gold light. The streets smelled of fresh bread and rain, and the Seine moved slowly beneath the bridges like a quiet heartbeat. Inside the gallery, everything was still: the chairs, the canvases, the echoes of last night's applause. Elena stood by the window, holding a cup of coffee in both hands. The ring on her finger caught the sunlight and shimmered faintly. For a moment, she simply watched the city breathe. After all the noise, the fame, the endless proving of herself, silence finally felt like home. Adrian entered quietly, his coat draped over one arm. "You are awake early," he said. "I could not sleep," she replied, smiling. "It still feels unreal." He moved closer, his voice gentle. "It is real. You earned every second of it." She looked around the room, at her paintings, at the seat that had started it all, now restored and standing proudly in the center. "Do you remember when I said broken things can still hold weight?" He nodded. "I do." "I think I was wrong," she said softly. "They do not just hold weight, they carry meaning. Every crack becomes part of the story." He smiled. "Then maybe that is what we are, two cracks that finally fit." And they both laughed quietly, the kind of laughter that comes after too much pain and enough peace. Outside, the first visitors of the morning began to gather by the entrance, taking photos of the sign above the door. A young woman held her partner's hand and said in French, "It is the love story everyone dreams of." Elena heard it and turned to Adrian. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I had not sat at the wrong table that night?" "I do," he admitted. "And every time I imagine it, I realize I would still be looking for that table." She reached for his hand, their fingers intertwining naturally. Maybe fate is just a series of wrong turns that end up exactly right. He squeezed her hand lightly. "Then let us keep getting lost together." Later that day, they walked through the streets of Paris without security, without cameras, just two people blending into the rhythm of the city. They stopped at a small café by the river, the kind with crooked chairs and uneven floors. Elena chose a seat near the window and smiled. Adrian raised an eyebrow. "That one?" "Yes," she said. "It feels a little unstable. Perfect, do you not think?" He laughed. Fate would approve. They spent the afternoon there, sharing pastries and sketches on napkins. She drew the outline of two chairs side by side. He wrote beneath it in careful handwriting. "The right mistake." As evening fell, the lights along the river flickered to life. Musicians began to play, and the sound of laughter floated through the warm air. Elena rested her head on Adrian's shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "I used to think love had to be perfect," she murmured. "Now I think it just has to be real." Adrian looked out at the river. Real is the only kind that lasts. The night deepened, wrapping the city in quiet glow. Across the street, a child pointed at the gallery poster showing their story title and said, "One day I want to find my seat too." And somewhere between the hum of the music and the whisper of the wind, Elena smiled, knowing that sometimes the most beautiful stories begin with a single, simple mistake. As they stood to leave, Adrian whispered, "Ready?" She nodded. "Always." Emin. Together, they walked hand in hand toward the bridge, their silhouettes fading into the soft Paris night proof that love, once written by fate, never truly ends. Months passed, and Paris moved through another season of light. The leaves along the Seine turned golden, falling like whispers onto the river's surface. The Cole Art Gallery flourished, not because of its prestige, but because it had become something rare, a place where kindness and art lived together. Elena's work continued to inspire visitors from every corner of the world. Each piece told a quiet story of imperfection and hope. Her favorite display remained the same, the two chairs facing each other, one slightly cracked, one whole, bound by a single line of gold through the fracture. Beneath it read her inscription, "Broken does not mean lesser, it means lived." One morning, as she prepared for a workshop with young artists, Adrian entered the gallery carrying a small envelope. He looked more relaxed these days. The sharpness of his corporate edges softened into something human. He handed her the envelope. "This came in from New York this morning. I think it is worth your time." Elena opened it carefully. Inside was a handwritten invitation from her old café on 9th Avenue. The owner, Mrs. Delaney, had written, "We are hosting a small art night for local painters. The theme is beginnings. If you happen to be back in the city, your seat will always be waiting." "Ugh," Elena laughed softly. She still remembers. Adrian smiled. How could she forget? That café is practically a monument now. People still ask which table it was. She looked up at him. "Maybe we should go back. Not for an exhibition, just to visit." "Back to the beginning," he said. "I like that." 2 weeks later, they arrived in New York. The city greeted them with the same restless energy, the same noise that used to intimidate her. Yet now it felt smaller, friendlier, like an old friend she had finally learned to understand. When they entered the café, everything was just as she remembered, the same hum of conversation, the same bell over the door, even the same number card on the table by the window. Table 12. The waitress smiled as they sat down. "You two picked the lucky seat," she said playfully. Elena met Adrian's eyes and laughed. "We know." Oh, they ordered coffee and sat quietly, letting the memories wash over them. She traced her finger along the wooden surface, the faint scratch marks from years of use. "You know," she said softly, "I used to think this table was just a mistake, but I realize now it was a doorway." Adrian nodded. A doorway disguised as an accident. Outside, the rain began to fall, soft and steady, just like that first night. The rhythm of it filled the space between their words. Elena took out her sketchbook, the same one that had once changed everything, its edges worn but strong. She opened to a blank page and began to draw the table, the two coffee cups, the reflection of the rain on the glass. Adrian watched her, his voice quiet. "What will you call this one?" She smiled. "Homecoming." They stayed until the cafe lights dimmed and the last customers left. When they finally stood to go, Elena looked around one more time. "It feels different now," she said, "but I think it always will." Adrian reached for her hand. "Different is good. It means we have lived." Outside, the rain shimmered against the streetlights. They walked together through the familiar streets, past the corners that once held their beginnings. For Elena, it was not about success anymore, or destiny, or even fate. It was about grace, the quiet kind that comes from learning to love the imperfection that started it all. As they turned the corner, Adrian squeezed her hand gently. "So, what comes next?" She smiled, looking up at the city that had once frightened her. "Whatever seat fate saves for us next." And as the rain fell around them, their laughter carried down the street two souls who once met by accident, now walking forward by choice, still writing their story together. Years later, New York remained the same city of noise and light, but to Elena and Adrian, it had become something softer, almost sacred. They had turned mistakes into milestones, and every street corner carried a memory of who they used to be. On a clear autumn afternoon, the Cole Foundation opened a new branch in the same neighborhood where everything began. The space was smaller than the Grand Gallery in Paris, but it had warmth. In the center stood one familiar piece, the restored café table from table 12, preserved beneath glass. Above it hung a simple sign that read, "Every wrong turn has its reason." Elena stood before it, smiling quietly. Children from a local art class surrounded her, watching as she arranged colored pencils for their workshop. She told them about finding beauty in ordinary things, the way a cracked teacup could still hold warmth, or how a broken chair could still tell a story. Adrian entered, his hair now lightly touched with gray. He wore no tie, just his usual calm smile. He watched her for a while before speaking. "You turned that mistake into a movement," he said softly. "Half the city paints because of you now." She laughed. "No, they paint because they have stories to tell. I just reminded them it is all right to start messy." He stepped closer, slipping his hand into hers. "That is what I love most about you. You never stopped seeing value where others saw failure." She looked up at him, warmth filling her chest. "And you never stopped believing in the seat beside me." As the workshop began, one of the children pointed at the glass case. "Is that the real table?" the little boy asked. Elena nodded. "Yes, it is the seat where two strangers met and learned that mistakes can lead to miracles." The boy tilted his head. "So fate was the artist?" Elena smiled. "Maybe. Or maybe it was just two people who decided to stay when the world told them to leave." When the class ended and the sunlight began to fade, Adrian turned off the gallery lights. Together, they stood before the glass case one last time. The reflection of their faces merged with the table's surface. Two worlds meeting again in quiet symmetry. Adrian whispered, "After all these years, it still feels like yesterday." Elena leaned against him. "That is because love does not measure time. It measures moments." Outside, the evening lights of New York flickered alive, just as they had the night she sat at the wrong table. She reached into her bag and placed her old sketchbook beside the display, open to the first page where she had once drawn a broken chair. "For whoever sits next," she said softly. Adrian smiled. "May they find their story too." As they walked out hand in hand, the door closed gently behind them. Inside, the light glowed on the table, the same seat that had once been a mistake, now forever a symbol of grace, of second chances, and of a love written by fate.